Hi everyone, my name is Garrett Roach and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is something that I have always wanted to do. I've always wanted to create a YouTube channel where I could talk about my mental health and the journey I'm on and my therapy and just really all aspects of the journey I've been on in healing and recovering from my borderline personality disorder. And I wanted to create a YouTube channel just so there's a place with resources that are accurate, at least in my journey, free of stigma, and just can kind of give people a sense of hope that there is an opportunity to heal, to grow, to unlearn behaviors, and just to be a happy, healthy, more regulated person. When I started my journey, I went down that rabbit hole when I first started to become aware of myself, that I possibly had this illness. I started, Googling, watching YouTube videos, just really, self-diagnosing in a way. And I really felt like I recognized with all 9 of the BPD traits. And I remember there was so much stigma around it. And everywhere I would Google and look, from psychiatrists, from therapists, from professionals even, there would be articles and posting and videos just that our illness is hopeless, that they don't like working with us, that most psychiatrists will fire you as a BPD patient because at the end of the day, you're just a mess and you're untreatable. So there's so much stigma that our illness can't be treated, that it's lifelong. And most of us, and I'll go through the traits, but most of us carry this feeling of emptiness and feeling broken as a human being within us at a deep, deep level. And how can we even begin to heal from that broken and empty feeling when the field and psychiatrists and the stigma around us is telling us that we're so broken we can't be fixed? So I guess my hope in starting this YouTube channel and sharing my journey that I'm on so far and the rest of my journey is that maybe someone will watch this video and be like, okay, if he could do it, maybe I can heal. Maybe it's not hopeless. Maybe this illness isn't lifelong. So in this video today, I plan on kind of breaking down a lot of things. It is going to be a lengthy video, so I hope you're able to stick around through it. First, I'm going to kind of break down, my definition of what I feel like borderline personality disorder is, what that experience living with that illness has been like for myself. With BPD, there are 9 traits, and to be technically diagnosed, professionally by a psychiatrist, you have to identify with 5 or more of those 9 traits. So what happens there is most people, will have just a few of them or all of them or a mix. So there's such a, almost like a spectrum of BPD on how it can manifest for yourself. So do take that into account watching this video, that everyone's experience with this illness is going to be different. Not everyone's actually going to have the same traits and behaviors. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm 28 years old. Since I was about 13 or 14, I have identified with all 9 of these traits in literally my day-to-day life all day. So without a doubt, I really knew at a deep level when I was self-diagnosing that this was me. So the journey that I will share with you guys is going to be all 9 of those traits and this journey I've been on of unlearning those and no longer needing to identify with them. And I'm also going to talk about the process of my healing. I have been in dialectical behavioral therapy for about a year. I will go into details about DBT therapy, but DBT therapy was originally designed specifically for BPD patients, and it has changed my entire life. Through that DBT therapy, I've been able to unlearn those traits. Combined with dialectical behavioral therapy, I have had a steady meditation practice, I have had a steady mindfulness practice, and I have also self-medicated. I personally, again, everyone's journey is different, so I'm talking about my journey. I don't have a great relationship with mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, antidepressants, anything like that. I grew up with a lot of trauma around those. It was used as a numbing agent for me as a child, not to really heal me, and I was actually misdiagnosed and just medicated. So I'm really willful, I guess, about medication. So I have been medicating and regulating with cannabis my whole life, and most recently actually quit smoking, curbed that habit, and I now microdose on mushrooms, so psychedelics, and that's been a new experiment of mine too. So I want to talk about those three aspects: my DBT therapy, the mindfulness and meditation practices, how that's been incredibly helpful for me, and then how I have used cannabis or mushrooms to kind of regulate, to help my mood instability so I can be more effective in my therapy and my meditation and my mindfulness. So, what is borderline personality disorder? It's very misunderstood, and in simplest terms, I would call it an instability disorder. So BPD really it's marked by mood instability, intense mood swings, the inability to control those moods. And then not only the inability to control those extreme heightened moods and emotions and feelings, through autopilot, dissociation, we've allowed those patterns of emotions and feelings to become futile. They affect our interpersonal relationships with others, with ourselves. That can, fester into shame cycles. It really is just instability in our moods, our behaviors, and our relationships. And there's a lot of factors that go into what creates that, and there's still a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of research that still needs to happen. And again, everyone's experience is going to be different. I will say in my experience, and most people I've talked to that are diagnosed BPD, a lot of their trauma is rooted in childhood trauma. Childhood trauma that was never healed, that was invalidating, that didn't teach them how to cope with their stronger emotions, how to regulate themselves, how to be effective in communication, how to have effective interpersonal relationships, how to love themselves. So we grow up with this sense of brokenness, being empty, being inadequate. We have a deep-rooted fear of abandonment, all these aspects that we were never taught as children, how to cure and how to heal and how to, cope with. And then that combined with all that childhood trauma just allowed us to go into adulthood, just repeating all these behaviors and patterns that we used as children to protect ourselves, that we were never taught were not only unhealthy coping mechanisms, but we were never taught to stop them. So then they continue into our romantic relationships, our adult relationships, our friendships, our work, and it's an ongoing cycle. So at the root of it, that's really what BPD is, instability. And the mind is powerful. You can learn healthier coping mechanisms. You can unlearn bad behaviors and replace them with healthier behaviors. You can learn to stop being a self-critic, and you can learn to love yourself. You can learn to love others. You can learn emotional intelligence. You can learn interpersonal effectiveness, and you can learn how to have healthier relationships. We all come into this world innocent, golden, and pure. As human beings, we are designed to be pure and compassionate and empathetic. And what happens is, in this world that we live in, this realm, that we're in our bodies, we go through this life where culture teaches us anxiety, teaches us fear, teaches us to live on autopilot. Western culture, generational cycles, generational trauma, all of it really invalidates our existence as human beings and that deep desire that we were born with to feel loved and to love ourselves and to love others. So I guess what I'm saying is part of the BPD too, and I'm learning it all, it's not changing who we are. It's actually, when we heal from BPD, it's going back to who we were meant to be, that inner child, that person you were before the world broke you And then you learn to become that broken person because that was the stories that you were fed and that you fed yourself. So one thing I do want to add on too that I find incredibly insightful that I learned through DBT therapy is something called the biosocial theory. So the biosocial theory is a theory in the psychiatry field and behavioral field where scientists, describe personality disorders, mental illnesses, and disabilities as biologically determined personality traits mixing with environmental stimuli. So again, biosocial theory is traits and how you were born. So biological traits, things you were born with, who you are, combined with environmental stimuli. So what that means in BPD and what it really means in my situation, and again, some people might be different. Some people with BPD don't have childhood trauma. It's all different. But for me, this is very real. I was born what is called a highly sensitive person. From day one of my life, I feel emotions and empathy and compassion and things like that on a level that most people don't. Everything is heightened, everything is extreme. It's that sensation of being an empath. When you hear people say they're empathetic or they're empaths, that's what they're saying. They're highly sensitive people, and it's a real category of people. So what happens is I was born as a highly sensitive person, an empath, a person more in tune to my emotions and intuition than most people. So not only was I born highly sensitive, I had environmental stimuli that didn't validate that or teach me how to live being more sensitive than others. I had trauma and abuse and invalidation happen to me as a child. So I internalized everything that was happening to me, and it became shame and hatred and rage and dissociation, and I became a very unhealthy person and then an unhealthy adult, and it all just continued. So biosocial theory is just saying that you were born sensitive and your environment was invalidating, and those things together can kind of manifest and create BPD. So trait number 1 is intense mood swings. This one is a big defining factor between bipolar and borderline because the two get mixed up a lot. Typically, and this is kind of a black and white definition, and again, just sharing my experiences, but bipolar, moods last longer. You have long periods of mania, long periods of sadness, and the moods come and go, and you shift in and out of those identities. Things are prolonged. In my experience with BPD, and most people I know that are BPD, borderline, those mood swings come and go. Within like a 30-minute time frame, you can go from feeling empty to broken to rageful to happy to on cloud 9. It like comes and goes so quickly. So there's really not periods of mania or anything. It's like stimuli and triggers just constantly pulling us around in our emotions because we were never taught how to regulate and control them. So mood swings, and they're frequent and fast. They don't happen in long periods. It's not, months of depression and months of happiness. It's all over the place. Rage, sadness, anxiety. It can be kind of seen and perceived as people as being dramatic or overly sensitive. A lot of people that are in relationships with BPD people or know us describe the feeling of our mood swings as having to walk on eggshells around us, because you never really know what mood at any moment is going to come out of us, especially if we are still unaware of ourselves and kind of lost in that trance of dissociation and unworthiness. So mood swings, and that was a big one for me. I am an incredibly rageful, depressed person, and my moods have literally controlled my life. So that was a very big one for me. The next one, so trait 2, is distorted and unstable sense of self. This was a huge one for me too. And this is actually one of the ones that I still struggle with. As BPD people, we had to grow up so quickly. We've been so lost in our trauma and our cycles and our emotions and our thoughts that we never really developed a sense of self as children. It goes back to like that how I was kind of describing how we were born one way, and then our ego and our culture and our stories and what happens to us kind of shapes us into who we are. Well, the reality is that's not who we are. So I guess what I'm saying is that the lack of sense of self, what that means is I didn't feel like I was a person, that I knew who I was, that I didn't have values, I didn't have morals, I didn't have any connection or sense of belonging to the world or any feeling of meaning to my life. Everything was emotion driven. Everything was about survival. And my identity through my whole adult life was the angry person, the bad person, the shameful person. I would tell myself, my inner self-critic, that I was empty, I was broken, I was unworthy, I fucking hated myself. So I guess what I'm saying is I allowed all those stories to become my identity. So a lot of it's been undoing that self-talk, the stories I carry, breaking down my ego so I can discover who I really am, what my morals are, what my values are, how I want to align myself with those values so I can become a future version of myself I actually want to be, instead of always acting out on my shame stories, which keeps me feeling like a bad person. If I feel like a bad person and then that leads me to a bad behavior, I stay a bad person. So, sense of self. You lack a sense of self and identity. So now that we've talked about mood swings and sense of self, the third trait is explosive anger. So I know this can kind of go in hand with mood swings, but it's kind of a trait on its own. And again, not everyone has explosive anger. You only have to have 5 of the 9 traits or some mix of them. So that's kind of why anger is its own. I personally suffered from extreme rage in my relationship with myself and my relationship with others through all of my 20s and my adolescence. I was the person that would scream, yell to be heard, slam doors when I was angry. I break things, hit holes in walls. I was just a very angry, rageful person when things would get too intense for me. And I know that sounds so extreme, but in my situation, everyone's different, but I grew up in a household where that was normal. As a small child growing up, the adults around me, that's how they communicated with each other. They screamed, they hit each other, they threw things. It was explosive anger in my household at all times, so that became my norm. So as my child and adolescent brain developed, my go-to behavior to deal with intense, stressful, distressful moments was to get angry. And then that became learned cognitive behavior that carried on to adulthood. So again, a trait that you can unlearn. You can learn not to be explosive. You can learn to feel your emotions without acting out on them in such an extreme level. So yeah, rage and extreme explosive anger is a big one. And again, that's one of the ones that gives people the sensation of walking on eggshells around us, because they don't know what's going to trigger us that's going to lead to those rage, anger, explosive cycles. And sometimes we are so unaware of ourselves that we aren't even aware that there's a trigger happening that's a trigger from our childhood that's causing those cycles of anger. So that's trait number 3. Trait number 4, fear of abandonment. I had this one as well, and this is actually one that I still suffer from and identify to, and I'm working so hard on unlearning. But typically BPD people have a deep-rooted fear of abandonment. We were abandoned as children and not nurtured, not validated. So we carry around this deep fear within us that we can't trust people, that everyone at some point is going to unlove us, is going to hate us, is going to abandon us, is going to reject us. And what typically happens is because of our cycles of reactivity and us not being aware of our behaviors and being lost in those cycles that we developed from childhood to protect ourselves from the world, we unknowingly push people away before they can push us away. We leave people before they can leave us. We bounce when shit gets intense. It's a lot of, if you're not familiar with attachment styles and relationships, I recommend Googling those, but I definitely have a very insecure, avoidant attachment style. When anything becomes too real in any kind of impersonal relationship, I retreat, I withdraw, I run away, I withdraw from the relationship and the situation because in my brain, my ego and my stories are telling me that you don't like me, that you're gonna abandon me. So it's gonna be much easier for me if I just withdraw before you hurt me. It goes back to that learned behavior as a child of when things got too explosive in my house, when, adults were hitting each other, when it got really scary and unsafe. I would go to my room, hide, escape into books. I was that child that was always in my room. So that feeling of withdrawing and wanting to leave before you're left becomes your reality and your go-to instinct. And a lot of that in BPD and DBT therapy can be unlearned too. You can learn to become secure in yourself, and you can learn to become secure in your attachment styles. You can learn to have those new thought processes that when your friend cancels plans on you day of, you don't have to take it personally. They don't hate you. They don't think you're horrible. You don't need to get angry at them and break up with them as a friend before they can hurt you because, them canceling plans on you day of triggered your fear of abandonment. It's not about you. Maybe their babysitter canceled. Maybe they got called into work. Maybe they're dealing with their own internal struggles and are just too sad to hang out that day. So you can unlearn that process too. And that's a trait that I still identify with, but I am trying so hard to become mindful of that attachment style. And I have a lot of practices in place with my therapist where I'm actively learning to feel more secure in my attachment style and my relationships and not to be triggered all the time feeling like people are going to abandon me. I can be here for myself. And I don't have to take everything so personally. I can lift that suffering off of myself and show compassion towards other people. So that's the other trait, just that deep-rooted fear of abandonment. So the next trait is unstable relationships. So again, instability disorder. Unstable moods, behaviors, relationships. So unstable relationships naturally is a part of it. So, because we grow up in these environments where we were invalidated and, taught all these behaviors of withdrawing, of shutting down, getting lost in fears and anxieties and shame, and then acting out and having this fear of abandonment where we push you away before you push us away, and being avoidant and being explosive and having mood swings, and all these things start to mix together. It makes for really, really challenging interpersonal relationships. And then that furthers the sense of abandonment, the sense of brokenness, the sense of emptiness. So it's a vicious cycle where everything works together to keep us stuck. Very unstable relationships. And typically you will bounce from one to the next, repeating the same cycles that you saw in your own childhood home or learned from somewhere else. And you're in autopilot, with this longing for love and connection. So you're fighting for it, but not only are you fighting for it, you're just repeating the same things that you don't know how to stop repeating, so everything fails. And that's romantic relationships, friendships, relationships with family, even relationships with yourself. I've had a really challenging relationship with myself for a very long time, up until recently, just hated myself. So very unstable relationships. And until you can learn to regulate your moods, regulate your anger, be aware and mindful of your fear of abandonment and the triggers so you can have a more secure attachment style and not, lash out at people all the time or withdraw and then they think you don't like them anymore. If you can learn to undo those things, then naturally your relationships become easier. And I'll talk about it when I get into the DBT part, but one of the modules of DBT therapy is interpersonal effectiveness. So a module where you are learning how to be more effective in your relationships and how to maintain stable relationships. So it's possible to learn that as well. Next up is another one that I also have identified with a lifetime, impulsive self-destructive behaviors. So a lot of us, again, when all these things start to combine, we develop these habits of impulsiveness and really destructive behaviors that temporarily make us feel better. So pretty much unhealthy coping mechanisms. But because for those fleeting moments, they make us feel good, we keep going back to them and we have no other ways to make ourselves feel good, no healthy coping mechanisms. So we always lean back into those. They make us feel whole. The best way I can explain it is I have carried around this sensation right here of feeling empty for a very long time. And when that emptiness gets really, really deep, I will fill it with anything and everything that will make me in that moment feel whole so I can feel alive. And for a lot of people in BPD, that is reckless, like unsafe sex. It's impulsive spending habits like retail therapy, which gives you a sense of happiness for a moment, which then you go home and you're broke, you spent too much money, and then the shame's back. It's all a cycle. The sex will do that to you too. A big one for me has been reckless driving. Just really any behavior that's impulsive that gives you a sense of relief in a moment. Trigger warning, and I'm so sorry. But yeah, self-harm, cutting, denying yourself food, an eating disorder you may develop, like any impulsive, reckless, unhealthy coping mechanism that you engage in unmindfully and unconsciously to make yourself feel whole. And again, you can learn healthier coping mechanisms, and you can also learn mindfulness through DBT. So when those intrusive thoughts start popping up and you go, I need to go shopping, I need to speed, I need to cut, I need to go have sex with a stranger to feel good, you can become aware of those sensations and then curate new things to replace those impulses with. Journaling, calling a friend, cuddling with your animals, reading your favorite book. Like there's so many things that I've learned to make myself feel whole. And then what happens is that sense of emptiness is like going away because not only am I finding a way to make it feel whole, the way I'm making it feel whole is healthy. And it's maintaining a sense of wholeness so I can maintain it versus temporary things like sex, drugs, impulsiveness that may make me feel whole, but what happens is when that feeling goes away, it deepens the hole of emptiness because it creates more shame. I feel bad about the activity I just engaged in, so now I fucking hate myself even more. So now I need something even bigger and better. So the impulses get worse. They become more destructive, and then all the traits start working together. So impulsive, self-destructive behaviors. Okay, so the next trait is actually self-harm, which I guess I kind of just lumped a little bit of that into the impulsive, self-destructive behavior trait. Impulsive, self-destructive behaviors, I guess, would be more of the reckless driving, impulsive shopping, skipping meals, speeding, little things like that. And I guess self-harm is more of a trait on its own. So I guess the separation there is some people will engage in impulsive self-destructive behaviors but not take it to the level of like cutting or self-harm. So two separate traits. I did cut through my entire childhood for years and years, sometimes through my adult life too. And that was a coping mechanism I picked up as a child. When I was around 13, 14, I started cutting myself because at least for me, I because of the way I'll get into this in another video, but because of my trauma and the circumstances of my trauma and the stories I was told by parents and my environment and just everything that happened to me, I didn't feel worthy, and I didn't feel like my life was worth living and that I would ever have meaning to my life. And I felt like a burden. I felt like everything would just be better without me. And I didn't really have, the desire to kill myself at that time. So it was more about self-harming to like punish myself, which would channel those emotions and give me a moment of clarity because like the focus would be on the pain. But then again, that would fester into shame and further cycles of all the other traits because now I feel intense shame and inadequacy and all these other issues because I'm harming myself. And then that fucks up the sense of identity too. Like now I identify as my sense of self as like a cutter. So I suffered from that one too. Next trait would be chronic feelings of emptiness. I kind of touched on this too, but when all these traits come together and everything's feeding together, you developed a sense and a feeling of being empty, that you just are nothing, have nothing, can provide nothing, can give nothing, can do nothing. It's a really, really hard sensation to feel. And if you feel like you recognize that, I recommend doing a little bit of research on it on your own. But I definitely struggled for a long time with chronic feelings of emptiness. And then when those feelings of emptiness arise where I need to feel whole or fulfilled, I didn't have anything healthy to know how to do that. And I was stuck in like the reactivity. So I would choose fear of abandonment, withdrawing, rejecting people before they can hurt me. I would choose impulsive shopping, driving, sex. I would choose, hurting myself, denying myself food, like any of these things to punish myself, hurt myself, or I would latch onto things to feel whole momentarily. And there's a lot of ways you can feel that hole of emptiness. It doesn't have to be something so intense like cutting. It could be as simple as something I did as I spent my 20s working about 80 hours a week and just using my career as a distraction. So instead of sitting with my feeling of emptiness and learning how to feel more fulfilled and more creating meaning in my life, I chose to numb myself with work. So I filled myself with this sense of purpose and work. And then one day I realized, like, that's not me. My career is not my identity. I need another way to feel whole. I need to feel whole with relationships, with self-compassion, with, a sense of self. So yeah, chronic empty feelings. It's a big one. And then the very last trait, and I identify with this one as well, is dissociation, or a sense of losing touch with reality. For a lot of us, when all these traits come together and for a very long period of time, you start to dissociate. And if you're unfamiliar with dissociation, for everyone it's a little different, but it's kind of an out-of-body experience where the brain just shuts down. You have reached a level where you can no longer feel, you can no longer react, you can no longer be, and you just become numb. And it's literally like an off switch goes off in your brain. For me, dissociation, people would sound like Charlie Brown to me. Like, murr, 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 murr. Like, I would just not be present. And it's you getting so lost in your fears and your stories, you're just no longer here anymore. And then when you're dissociative and you're on autopilot and you've lost touch of reality, you're not self-aware. And then that's when your ego and your stories and your thoughts take control of your life. You further your fear of abandonment. You further the self-harm. You engage in the mood swings and the anger, and you feed it, and you make everything worse. And the cycle goes and goes and goes. And not only is it going, but you're dissociative to it, so you don't even freaking realize it's happening. So that's what dissociation is. So now that I've kind of broken down to you what BPD kind of is and the 9 traits of it and kind of the aspects of it that just curates this lifestyle of instability and reactivity and being dissociative to it, and how it impacts your moods, behaviors, and relationships. That's really the gist of it. So now I kind of just, I want to share with you my journey. The big change for me was starting dialectical behavioral therapy. I swear by it. It has saved my life, is saving my life. And I wish more people were aware of it. I wish it was more easily accessed. But I just want to share a little bit about that. So I've been in dialectical behavioral therapy for almost a whole year now. And dialectical behavioral therapy is normally done in 2 different types of settings, group therapy and individual therapy. So I do DBT every single week, and I have every single week for a year. I go to my therapist and I have an individual session where I just talk to my therapist, talk about my week, talk about, things I'm trying to apply to my life and just all those things you would normally talk to a therapist about. And then simultaneously, I have a group session that same week where I get together with a group of people every single Tuesday night, and we learn DBT skills together. So the best way I can explain this is it's not really group therapy, it's more of a class setting. Think of it as an emotional intelligence class. So pretty much you get together with this group every week, and you get to have this sense of connection to people and this sense of belonging that kind of undoes a lot of the BPD traits in its own. And then together, every single week, you go through a new chapter in the DBT, official training book. It's like a whole book of, skills and chapters and modules for the year. And you learn a skill, you talk about it in a group, you dissect it, and then you spend the week applying it to your life. You apply it to your life, you talk to your individual therapist about it, and then you go back to group the next week. You guys kind of recap on it, share what, your experiences that week were with that skill, and then you learn something else. So it's a really wonderful, wonderful process. You're getting connection with people, you're getting understanding, you're getting a really safe space to be vulnerable, and then you're being taught all these amazing, beautiful self-regulation skills, and then you're getting to apply them, and then simultaneously you're getting therapy at the same time. And that's also helping you unpack childhood trauma and all those kind of layers. So in a gist, that is what DBT is done typically in a setting. It's individual and group. You can do it virtually. A lot of people are doing it through Zoom now, through COVID from the pandemic. There's a lot of resources for it. It was originally created actually for BPD people, but you don't have to be BPD actually to benefit from this type of therapy. A lot of people are in it with depression, just general anxiety disorders, PTSD, just really anyone that wants to be a more effective person in regulating their moods and having more stable behaviors, moods, and relationships. And the gist of DBT really is, and its main goals is to teach you how to be present, mindful, and to live in the moment, how to develop healthy ways to cope with stress and distress, to counter all those other traits that aren't healthy coping mechanisms, how to regulate your emotions, and how to improve your relationships with others. And by living in the moment, learning mindfulness, learning distress tolerance, learning how to regulate your emotions, and learning personal effectiveness, if you can master those things and be accountable in mastering them and applying them to your life, you can unlearn those 9 traits. You really can. DBT, it's broken down into modules. So typically it takes 9 to 10 months, sometimes close to a year, to go through the whole DBT program. It's different for everyone. But once you go through the whole book, there's 4 modules, so 4 sections of the book. One is mindfulness. So learning how to become mindful and present in life, how to leave those places of dissociation and an autopilot, how to feel your emotions, how to become present in relationships, how to become present and connected to the world around you so you can break those feelings of disconnect and loneliness and abandonment and stuff. Mindfulness, that module, has changed my life in every way. So on top of DBT, I practice mindfulness daily. I have a mindfulness practice. I make goals to become mindful. I eat mindfully. I set my phone down and I make myself taste the food and feel the sensations while I'm eating so I can enjoy my food. When I'm out on a walk, instead of being buried in my phone or lost in my thoughts where I'm thinking about what may go wrong later in the day, I force myself to practice mindfulness. I look at the birds, I look at the trees, I feel the pavement touching my grounds, I feel the sensations in my body, and then by becoming present and grounded, I'm not lost in those stories of the past or the future. Our thoughts aren't facts. What's factual is this present moment we're in that we're not living in because our trauma and our illness and our traits are keeping us so lost in the past and the future. So core mindfulness, that module, and learning a practice of mindfulness is a game changer. You can't break reactivity and cycles and bad behaviors if you are not self-aware and present. So the goal is to find presence in your life and to exist in the moment and to let go of all those cognitive thought patterns of stressing about your past and what could go wrong. And when the triggers arise, it quickens your fear, and then you run away and withdraw before you can be abandoned. But if you're mindful, you can feel that sensation in your body and go, oh, that's anger I'm feeling. Why am I feeling angry? I'm not really angry at my friend. I think what they're doing is reminding me of a way someone treated me growing up. I don't want to repeat that cycle. I'm going to tell my friend it's okay, and I'm going to give myself some compassion. And you can break those cycles with mindfulness that way. So mindfulness is awesome. That's module 1. Module 2 in DBT is distress tolerance. So this is a chapter where week after week in your group setting and in your individual, you learn distress tolerance skills. And these are what we refer to as DBT skills. Stop, dear man, the please skill, tip, pros and cons, checking the facts, wise mind, like all these skills I use in my daily life, I've learned through the distress tolerance module. So distress tolerance skills are really just healthy coping mechanisms to handle distressful situations, to handle rage, to handle your mood swings, to check the facts so you don't allow thought patterns to turn into behaviors you don't want to continue to exhibit. This is to help you counter those traits of self-harming, of impulsive behavior, of explosive anger. It can reduce the sensation that people feel like they have to walk on eggshells around us. So distress tolerance has been a really big one for me. And again, though, it's something that you have to be mindful of. You have to combine it. You have to catch yourself in those patterns through time and practice, and then apply the distress tolerance skills you're learning instead of withdrawing, instead of harming yourself, instead of throwing things, instead of screaming. You got to replace it with these new skills and retrain those cognitive neural pathways in your brain. So mindfulness, distress tolerance. Module 3 is interpersonal effectiveness. So this is a module in DBT where in your group and individual, you learn how to be effective in your relationships. You learn how to make friends. You learn how to attract people in your life you want. You learn how to become mindful of those people, how to take the lens off your suffering and how to put that lens onto other people so you can create meaningful relationships, which then gives you a sense of purpose so you no longer feel so empty and broken. It's beautiful. And I have, over this last year, my friendships have flourished, and I've never felt like I had friends. And I am incredibly proud of that. Sorry, I'm crying. That was a big one for me. Interpersonal effectiveness gave me so many tools this last year, and I'm finding a lot more meaning in my relationships, and I have some really amazing people in my life right now, and I'm very incredibly grateful for that. And having that meaning and that sense of connection has like literally just shattered my sense of emptiness. So that's a beautiful chapter too. And then your last module in DBT you go through the program is emotional regulation. So this is just a chapter where you're literally just learning about emotions. And I know that sounds so silly, but we as a society, especially Western culture, are so out of touch with our emotions and our mental health. So this chapter teaches you how to name your emotions, how to label them, how to properly feel your emotions without pushing them away or numbing, but also how to feel those emotions and how to check facts of situations to like dial your intensity back so you can feel your emotions at the level you're supposed to. Like, be angry your friend canceled plans on you, but you don't need to allow that anger to intensify to a level where you become rageful, you know? So it's emotional regulation. It's about feeling what you're feeling, but at the correct intensities and levels. And then that chapter is full of DBT skills as well, of how to regulate your emotions a little better. So essentially, this whole program, it really, if you do it right and really believe in it and really apply it and take it seriously, you can undo those 9 traits. I swear. And it's hard work. It's very hard work. It's turning your whole life inside out. It's unlearning everything about you that your ego and your trauma and your stories has tricked you into believing is your sense of self. And then it's picking up all the pieces and discovering who you are and who you want to be. It's messy and it's hard. But it has saved my life to the point where I've actually finished all 4 modules and I am paying every week. I'm going back through it and I'm learning even more. And it's like, I will keep doing it year after year. Like, I don't know if I'll ever stop DBT. It has brought so much for me and has changed my life. So number one thing I recommend is like, don't self-diagnose, because these 9 traits, like, I know I broke them down, but don't self-diagnose. If you think you identify, go see a therapist, go see a psychiatrist, talk about these things, ask about DBT. And then if you really are diagnosed and you really do have these things, and like I said, you don't even have to have BPD. If you're just honest that you struggle in these areas, say you only have 3 of them, you can still go into this type of therapy and spend 6-9 months in it and undo those 3 traits. Say you only have a fear of abandonment and mood swings. Like, you can learn to undo that through the impersonal effectiveness and the emotional regulation chapters. So incredible. Go to therapists and talk to them. Don't self-diagnose. That's my number one thing. So do take that away from this video, not to do that. And that's DBT. So I know this video is starting to get long. We have broken down borderline personality definition, the classic traits, how you're diagnosed. I talked about dialectical behavioral therapy as a therapy option and unlearning those traits and literally healing from your BPD. A few quick other things I want to throw into this video, because I'm trying to cram a lot into here, is I've talked about, my DBT practice, how mindfulness is a part of that, and how I've created a practice of mindfulness in my life that has countered the dissociation and has allowed me to be more effective in my DBT, because I'm no longer dissociative to myself, I'm self-aware. Through the mindfulness, I become self-aware. The other areas I wanted to talk about is I have maintained off and on, I haven't been the best about it, I'm actually being really good about it now, but a daily meditation practice. Meditation, in essence, is mindfulness. It's a mental exercise. A lot of people look at meditation as, I gotta sit here for 10 minutes and I can't think about anything. That's not what meditation is. It's not suppressing your thoughts and trying to learn how to ignore them. It's about this mental exercise every day, 10 to 20 minutes, where you sit down, breathe, close your eyes, you ground yourself, you let go of everything, and you just are in that moment. You feel your body, you feel your breath, You feel your emotions in your body. You feel the ground beneath you. You're grounded. And then through that, you find a home base. The feeling of your breath in your stomach. You're in and out of your breath. The feeling of warmth in your hands. Something you smell in the room. Maybe a fan you hear in the background. You hone in on your home base. And then when your thoughts wander, oh, this is gonna happen at work today. Ooh, I fucked up that yesterday at work. Oh God, that friend canceled on me yesterday. They must hate me. When these intrusive thoughts start coming up, it's okay, let them go. And then what happens though is when you catch yourself, oh, wait, I'm thinking. You don't judge yourself. You don't immediately try to suppress it. You go, hi. You say hello to it. You feel it. You allow it to exist. You become okay with it. You accept it. And then you allow it to pass because emotions pass. And then you find your home base again. And it's hard. But when that becomes a practice every single day, it's like riding a bike. It's like any skill, you master it, and it's a mental exercise where you are teaching yourself to hear your thoughts and to heal your emotions and to be aware of it all, but not to allow those emotions and thought processes to run your life. You're teaching yourself how to like U-turn is what I call it. You can U-turn. And then eventually you'll get to a point where, say something triggering happens, you're now self-aware, you're no longer dissociative, you've learned mindfulness, you've done DBT, you saw your trigger, and now through your meditation practice, you have the mental capacity of U-turning. You can go, okay, I'm angry right now, I'm not gonna suppress it though, I'm not gonna numb it, I'm just gonna U-turn, refocus on what I'm doing, finish my work, whatever I'm doing in this moment because I wanna maintain presence and mindfulness, and then later tonight, I'm gonna get out my journal. I wanna use some of my DBT, distress tolerance skills, and then I'm gonna solve whatever I'm angry about. Instead of in that moment, allowing it to become rage and explosiveness, furthering the cycles of reactivity. So meditation is everything. So the very last part of my healing journey, outside of DBT therapy, practicing mindfulness and practicing meditation and combining those three elements has been medication. Everyone's experience is different. It's very helpful if you feel like you need it and you talk to your therapist about it, to use a mood stabilizer or an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, a form of medication to help regulate that mood enough where these skills become more easily. Because for some people, the mood swings and dissociation are so unreal and intense that there's not even a way to get to the point where you can use these skills. I personally have a lot of trauma around medication. I was that child that was misdiagnosed, given a lot of different medications as a child. I wasn't given therapy at the same time. So the medication wasn't really being used as a tool to help me get through therapy. It was being used as a tool to fix me. And it wasn't fixing me. It was making me dissociative and numb to life. So personally, I have a really hard relationship with it. And trigger warning, some self-harm stuff coming up. Skip over the next few minutes if this is too much. Just want to give that warning. But I did try to commit suicide twice as a teenager, and both times I overdosed on the medication, like a whole bottle of it. So there's also a part of me that doesn't trust myself with medication like that. I feel like I would misuse it or become impulsive with it. So I didn't allow myself to have medication when I started DBT. I'm lucky because my therapist was really supportive, and for the last 9 or 10 years, I've been self-regulating with cannabis. I smoke weed daily, morning, day, and night. This is gonna be a whole nother video. I just wanted to throw it in here because it has been a tool in my healing. But cannabis has been a distress tolerance skill, I guess, for me. When things become too real, like whenever I'm like about to rage or about to do something impulsive because I'm feeling empty, instead of engaging in that like harmful activity, I would smoke weed to like make my empty feeling go away. Or I would smoke weed to come down enough where I wouldn't engage in the explosive anger, which was great. But what I found way down the road as like DBT continued and my self-awareness like opened and my ego dissolved, I realized I was misusing weed. Cannabis is like any drug. It's like caffeine, it's like sugar, it's even like an addiction to sex or video games. I really believe we need to reframe our relationship we have as a society and culture with drugs, because everything can be harmful in life. I believe marijuana can worsen your mental illness, it can trigger psychosis, it can really mess you up. But I also believe if you do it mindfully and you're aware of your usage of it and how you're using it, it can be an amazing tool. Unfortunately, I realized that I wasn't using it mindfully. You know, I would have moments where, say, a trigger happened and I wanted to engage in reckless activity, my impulsive, activities, or I wanted to like go down the rabbit hole of my intrusive thoughts and do what my brain was telling me to do. Instead of first going to DBT skills and mindfulness and like sitting with myself, I would immediately go to the weed. And then I would become numb and chill, spend 6 hours watching TV, and then like I'm out of it and my problem's just gone. And I didn't solve the problem, I just numbed myself to it. So I had a period where I was trying to become mindful of my cannabis usage. I was trying to like, okay, I gotta feel this, I gotta problem solve. Once I problem solve and allowed myself to sit with the emotion, I've tried everything else, then I'll go to weed. I wasn't able to do that. So very recently, I curbed and quit smoking. And simultaneously, when I quit, I am now experimenting, and my therapist is a part of this with me and is very supportive of it. And I want to be sharing a lot of this journey probably through future videos. I've been microdosing on mushrooms, on psilocybin mushrooms, so psychedelics. So I've been taking very small doses, like 1/10 of a gram, so 0.1 grams, 100 milligrams every morning in a capsule form. And I've been combining it with some other like natural remedies and herbs and things too. And so I guess I'm treating with a different type of natural medicine. And what I'm finding with that is that small microdose of psilocybin mushrooms is giving me mood regulation, like a serotonin boost. It's giving me like, I'm finding presence and mindfulness a little more easy. Like it's giving me all the good things I liked about weed, but I'm not like getting high. I'm not bogged down with like, when you smoke weed all day, every day, and you get real brain fogged, that furthers my dissociation. I can't use skills when I'm stoned all the time because I'm numb. So I'm finding recently that change in my medication practice is helping me. So I don't take antipsychotics. I just can't. My relationship with them doesn't work. And then I discovered through this year of journey that what I thought cannabis was helping me with, and it was in some areas, I wasn't truly able to use it properly. My relationship with it was hard because I wanted to like numb with it. So now I'm trying a new practice, which is the microdosing. So I will share that in future videos, how that goes. But the combination of medicating and mindfulness and meditation and DBT has really, I want to say, cured me of my borderline personality disorder. So I know that we've reached an hour on this video, so I'm going to wrap things up now because I finally have broken down all the elements of my healing process. But I real quickly, just to close, this is a part of the video I've been excited to share. Going down the BPD traits now a year later from where I was a year ago when I was lost in dissociation, lost in autopilot, like explosive rage every day. I was self-harming, like I was living that life and all those traits daily. And now that I have all this, I'm looking at things, and I've talked to my therapist about this, I don't have mood swings anymore. through distress tolerance and mindfulness and everything else I've been doing, I just don't have them anymore. I still feel anger, I still feel rage, I still get depressed, I still get anxious, I still get impulses to do things, but I'm not engaging in them anymore because I'm replacing them with new learned behaviors and practicing those behaviors and making them my habit. I'm learning new ways to deal with these extreme emotions I feel as a highly sensitive person. So I no longer have mood swings. I no longer have explosive rage. I can't tell you the last time I did anything explosive like that. I used to be really, really intense. And I'm embarrassed about a lot of things I've done in the past. I'm not judging myself anymore. I don't feel shame for those things anymore. I've forgiven myself and given myself compassion for it, but no longer have that. I no longer really engage in impulsive, reckless behaviors or self-harming. It's been a very long time since I've cut, a very long time since I've really done anything impulsive or reckless, because I've really reached such an extreme level of self-awareness that I don't want to do those things. They make me feel so shameful. And I'm so aware of that shame cycle that why would I do something to keep me in that cycle? I'm gonna use all my new things that I've worked so hard on building when I get those impulsive thoughts. I'm gonna go meditate and train my brain to notice those thoughts but not have to engage in them. So that's gone. I also can say the dissociation is gone. Now, I do have moments occasionally where I do feel for fleeting moments, I'm not here. But I'm always able to use mindfulness practices and exercises and skills to immediately reground myself and find myself. And when I am having rare fleeting moments where I don't feel connected or present, it's quick and I'm finding myself, and I'm not acting out during those stages of dissociation. I'm not cutting, I'm not engaging in reckless behaviors, I'm not feeding my moods and my fear of abandonment and my intrusive thought patterns. I'm being healthy. So I guess I can really say the only BPD traits to this day that I identify with in my day-to-day life as part of my identity still is the distorted sense of self. I really do still struggle knowing who I am as a person, but after a lifetime of trauma and dissociation and having no identity, it's going to take me longer than a year to form an identity. So I guess I'm not totally lost in that. I know who Garrett is now, and I have things that I enjoy in parts of my life, and I'm discovering values and morals, and I'm making objectives in my day-to-day life to make sure I'm aligning myself with who I want my future self to be. And then the only other trait I really feel I relate to still as well is fear of abandonment. That's very much me. I will say I'm aware of it. When I get upset that someone canceled plans on me, or I feel someone doesn't like me, instead of becoming reckless, I communicate now. I go, hey, I know that sounds crazy, but I'm feeling this way. Is this truthful? And then they can tell me no. I just couldn't get a babysitter. I'm okay, cool. So I guess I really only identify, now that I think about it, I said 4 earlier, but I really think about 3 of them only show up in my day-to-day life now, maybe 4. And my therapist and I were talking recently that I don't think I carry the identity and the diagnosis of being borderline anymore. And for so long that was my identity, that I was broken, that I had this illness. So I'm no longer choosing to call myself a BPD person. I'm Garrett. I unfortunately struggle with the sense of self, and I unfortunately have a fear of abandonment. I occasionally will have a mood swing. I'll occasionally have 20 minutes where I'm not present. I'm smoking weed and stuck in my phone, and I'm in la la land and dissociating. But it's nothing's at the level and the extremity that anything was before. But I also understand that I can relapse. That if I'm not accountable, that if I'm not mindful, that if I quit doing the things that I'm doing and I don't maintain this new lifestyle, I can go back into those patterns. So while it's not a lifelong illness, it is a new lifelong lifestyle I need to maintain. But that's like everything, like physical health. Say you're type 2 diabetic. That doesn't have to be lifelong, but the lifestyle you create to cure yourself of type 2 diabetes, you're gonna have to maintain your whole life so you don't relapse and become diabetic again. So yeah, this video was so long and I'm so thankful that you guys watched it. I'm like really hopeful that someone made it through it all, and I'm hoping to make a lot more videos just about every subject and everything, and I'm excited to share more. And I'm gonna say this in this video, I am so proud of myself. And I never thought this could be possible. And I meet so many people that I think have similar experiences than me, and they feel so hopeless. And it is not hopeless. You are worthy. You can be loved. You deserve to be loved. You can love yourself. You don't have to feel such extreme hurt. So I really hope this video can kind of unbreak some stigma, and that maybe sharing my story of how I really do feel like after a whole life of having these 9 traits in my everyday life, that through a year of all these things I just shared with you, I only identify with a few of them now, and they come and go. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching this video. Comment below if you guys have any questions. I would love to answer anything or point people in directions. And also, again, this video, I'm not a professional, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not here to diagnose anyone, so do not diagnose yourself through this video. This is just me sharing my experience, and if you feel like this is your experience and you can relate to it, please see a psychiatrist. Please explore DBT therapy. Please look into meditation practices. Please explore mindfulness. And yeah, thank you guys.